let me now touch upon the other concept I wanted to talk to you about, which is the concept of first mover advantages or early entry advantages. This is actually a very popular concept. When I teach, oftentimes my students just go ahead and assume that if a company comes early in the market, if they're the first mover, they will actually have an advantage. That's a common assumption, but in fact, it's often wrong. The reality is that first movers are typically not very successful. And if you look at companies that you probably associate with first movers, they're actually successful, but they were not first movers. Like, for instance, Google. Google in search, in internet search. In fact, before Google, there was Alta Vista and many other companies. And Google was not the first mover. Facebook, in social networks, you probably think Facebook was the first one, but there was, MySpace and Friendster and other companies. So the reality is that a lot of the companies that you think are first movers are not first movers at all. There are three factors that, according to the first mover advantage theory, would benefit early entrants. So one of them is what we call technology learning curve. The idea that, when you enter early, every technology has a learning curve. You get better at it as you do more of it. And so what happens is that if you enter early, you're going to get better at that technology, and when your competitors that enter later come into the industry, you will be better in that technology, meaning that you probably will have lower cost of production, for instance, or you will know how to do this stuff better. So that's one of the typical rationales for why entering early would be beneficial. The second one is what we call preemption of resources. The idea is that you come first, and you are sort of the first one that can choose different things. You can choose a distributor, probably that is the best distributor for that particular product, or you can choose, a location. For instance, for retail companies, it is very important to choose the best corner in the city. So you come there, you actually do a lease for 10 years or 5 years, and then that's your spot, and nobody else can take it away from you. So preemption of resources is also very important. And the last one typically is, switching costs. That if you come first, then those customers will be used to your product, to your customer service, and they'll be in a way locked into your company, and therefore that will actually defend you from the later entrants. The reality is that, as I said to you, the early entry doesn't really always pan out. It's not beneficial all the time. And what I have done in my own research is to try to look for other potential explanations of why early entry or late entry might be beneficial. And what I have this come out, and this is an article that I published in the Harvard Business Review, is that it's also important to know what conditions are in the industry where you're planning to enter. And in particular, we focus on two things, just to simplify the model. One of them is how fast the technology is changing, and the second one is how fast the market is growing. And if you think of it, these are sort of two very elementary ways of describing an industry, and particularly industry dynamics. And so what we postulate is that industries vary a lot in terms of how fast they grow, in terms of the market, and how fast the technology move. In a couple of graphs that I'm going to show you now on the screen, and they are coming from my article, what you see actually is that there are very different paces of technological evolution, say from PCs to vacuums, that you use to clean your house. And there's also very different paces of market evolution in some of those markets. And so what happens is that you then have to, once you enter into an industry, or before you enter, you have to make that decision. Well, is this industry moving very rapidly technologically wise? And is it moving rapidly in terms of the market growth, the demand? So I have another graph to show you here, which is actually a 2x2, that basically we put these two dimensions together. With just a high or low. That is your technology. Is the technology in your industry changing fast or slow? And is the market in your industry changing fast or slow? And what you see now in this quadrant that I'm showing you in the screen is that, when technology changes very fast and the market changes very fast, this is what in the graph we call the rough waters. That's actually the most complicated scenario for a first mover, okay? Because what happens is that when first movers enter in an industry like that, say social media that exploded and technology kept on changing, what happens is that the later entrants can always enter and use the latest technology that already has moved forward since the first entrant came, and actually have a product which is better than your product, the product of the first mover. And at the same time, because the market is growing so fast, what happens is that the new entrants, the later entrants, will always have enough customers to go after, because the market is just growing and growing and growing. There's no one company can satisfy the whole market. So that actually is the worst scenario for first mover. So if you are in a situation like that, you should be very careful whether you want to enter early. And you will only enter early if you have enough resources that actually you can grow very rapidly and keep very much on guard in terms of the technological advances. On the other side, the opposite, just to describe two quadrants of those four quadrants, the opposite side is when you have calm waters, which is the technology is moving slowly and the market is also growing slowly. That's actually the best quadrant, the best scenario for first movers, because you can actually enter the industry, the market is growing slowly, so you can capture most of that market and grow with the market as the market is growing. And because technology doesn't change so dramatically, the later entrants will never be able to outsmart you with new technology. So that is actually a quadrant where you have better chances to be successful as a first mover. And so it's interesting, just to wrap up with these short videos, let's go back with this idea, with these quadrants in mind. Let's go back to the idea of the electric car industry and GM having been the first mover and then Tesla coming later. If you think of it, GM had everything in their favor to be a successful first mover. The market for electric cars was moving quite slowly. In fact, it took a long time to grow. And the technology of electric cars has also moved very slowly. If you think of it, and the main reason because of that is because battery technology has evolved fairly gradually over time. So that was actually, if you think of it, that was kind of the perfect scenario for a successful first mover. And General Motors, because of these internal issues that we described before, this focus on hybrids and the internal politics that always have in these large corporations, decided to kill that project and lost a great opportunity to be an innovator and be considered today the company that reinvented themselves and drove the industry, the whole industry actually, one step forward to the new technology.